Hi, I'm Scott Tuplin, and I haven't done a video in a while, so I thought I'd show you how I'm dealing with this shelter in place as far as creativity goes, and what I'm making and how I'm making and what I'm making it with, because I haven't been able to get to my studio. I live in Brooklyn, where I'm recording this, and my studio is in Manhattan, and the building is shut down. They can't staff it, so no one can really be in there. So I thought I'd go over some of this stuff, what I use, how I use it, maybe a little bit of people have been asking for a pen and ink lesson. I'll show you some watercolor stuff that I work on and some sketchbook stuff. So here we go. So I think it would make sense to start with pencils, because that's what I start all my drawings with. I generally do not use wood pencils. I only use these 3mm Kurutoga uni pens, and they are amazing. I think they cost maybe $11. There's a metal one and a plastic one of the same kind. This is the plastic one, and this is the metal one, so it's a little bit more expensive. I just recently found this gray one, which I had never seen before. They're Japanese uni pens. Do Pilot make those? I'm not sure. But the reason I like them is because they've got a decent weight to them, and they friggin' work. I've never had a mechanical pencil besides this one ever in years and years of working with these that continues to advance the lead from inside. Always, almost always, I would have to take, let's see, I think I have one in here. Like I used these for a long time, these Pentel Graph Gear 1000s, because I prefer the 0.3mm. I liked how it goes back up into itself. Because if I kept them in my bag, like they're really fragile because they're such tiny tips. And if it's in your bag, it's in your backpack or something, your pocket, this can bend, and then the lead won't advance anymore. You keep the lead inside, you put it inside there, and then maybe 5 or 6 leads, and then as each one is finished, you just keep advancing it, and a new one comes out. It would never work. After like a month of using it, or sometimes less, the lead just wouldn't advance. So I would just get used to putting the lead in the top part, which is a huge pain. It's super easy to break and kind of not acceptable. So I switched to these thanks to, I believe my friend Renee French, gave me one of these and told me, but she told me about the Hi-Tec-C Gel Pen, which I love, and also these. She turned me on to these because she draws tiny and she actually has a 0.2mm, which are really rare and hard to find, but 0.3 is pretty good for me. Anyway, so these, you put the lead in the back, take the top off, and you stick it in that tiny hole, and it continues to advance. When one lead is finished, the next one advances. These supposedly have some weird technology where if you advance the lead, each time you advance it, it turns the lead. So you supposedly, I think it's when you put pressure on the tip. Here, let me show you. So supposedly if you put some pressure on the tip, whoops, I put it out too far. Each time you put pressure on it, it turns the lead inside the pencil so that you supposedly always have a sharp part of the lead. Because you know how it wears down like a chisel as you use it? That's kind of how they work, the graphite. It supposedly keeps it sharp. So you can continue, so you don't have to keep turning the pen. I don't know if that works. I'm sort of skeptical. I typically always just keep turning it anyway. And so as far as as far as erasing goes, I typically use these Mono Zeros Elastomer eraser by Tombow. And it's just like a mechanical pencil, but it's a tiny little eraser. I got my dad one of these for doing the crossword puzzle. It's got it advances through this plastic tip, but it's the same concept as a click mechanical pencil. So yeah, I use these to erase tiny little pieces and then draw and stuff like that. Occasionally I will use some of these plastic erasers. This is a Tombow. I'd heard recently people sing the praises of black plastic erasers, but PVC, I don't know. I can't really tell the difference. I guess it's PVC free and this is PVC. I wonder if that's like, why is that a big deal? I'm not sure. Anyway, these both work fine. You don't need to buy, I don't think you need to buy expensive erasers. Oh, what hardness I use as far as leads, I typically always use HB. I just ordered these because I just ran out of leads. These come, I don't remember, 15 pieces per container, which they're like $5 for the 3 of these, $6. Not too expensive. And I kind of hate messy art supplies, and with mechanical pencils, it's not really very messy. You don't get smudgy lead because it's like you're not putting that much lead down. You don't have to sharpen the pencil, and it's just a little bit cleaner and less of a mess. So yeah, so typically this is what I use to start all my drawings, and often I'll start and you know, it'll be a finished thing. This will be the finished part. The next part I'll go into is inking, because sometimes if I don't go straight to watercolor from like this is just straight to watercolor in my sketchbook from pencil, but I'll show you what it looks like when I start to ink, because I'm gonna start inking again, so I've got to get my mind around that anyway, so it's a good primer for myself. So ink, this is Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay Black India ink. I generally use this or their high carb Black Star ink by Dr. P.H. Martin's. I don't see that much of a difference. This is like half or a quarter the price of their Black Star inks. I don't think it matters that much for how I use it, but I'm sure someone else who knows more about it would. I don't know why this tape is on here. There's no reason. Oh, I don't know. I don't know why I put this on here. So this is generally what I use for inking. And I tend to use, I've got this weird, this was like a Kickstarter for a product called Poo Goo that it literally is just rubbery, sticky. Oh yeah, you can see right there. This Poo Goo Mini I bought. It's made for sticking your cell phone to your dashboard or something like that. But I use it I knock over my ink bottles, which is a friggin' nightmare. But this helps to keep it steady. So I bought a bunch of this stuff. I don't even think they make it anymore. So that I don't accidentally knock my ink over, because this stuff is friggin' potent. And then, so the pens that I use with this ink, and I'm gonna show you something crazy this is like one of my favorite things. A friend of mine gave me this box, and I keep my pens in this box. It's a leather antique inking box. It's got a little hinge on there, and it's got like a secret depressed button here where you press it in and it unlocks that little clasp there, and it's wooden inside. It's like velvety with wood, and isn't that amazingly gorgeous? This is a pen holder. This obviously is mispriced. This is for larger pen nibs that I don't use as often, especially at home. I'll use them in my studio when I'm working on larger projects. These are the really small, tiny ones that I generally use. With tiny little needle points. This is specifically this model, this pen nib is a Gillette 290, I think. That's the name of it. It's super flexible. You can see how I flex it on my thumbnail whenever I buy them, because if they're not exactly split down the middle, and it's so easy to manufacture these incorrectly, the ink won't flow, and it's incredibly frustrating to try and draw with these. But okay, wait, back to the box. So this is the actual, can you hear that? It's metal, and this is the ink pot. It's like a portable little ink pot. It's made out of, I think, brass, and it's got a clasp here. You push that, you can open it, and ink would go inside there. This is kind of corroded. It's like a metal stopper, and ink would kind of go in there. I don't use it because I don't really trust it, but it's nice and heavy, and it's just so cool. This is like something you would see in a museum somewhere, you know, of like, oh, this artist's supplies from the turn of the century or something like that. Listen to this. It's so satisfying, and it fits right in here. And then this drawer comes out, and this is crazy. So this is a little wooden box, and I think it's got, I'm not positive, but it's got sawdust in there, which is, I think, meant to sprinkle on like if you were signing documents, to sort of sprinkle on the ink to help it would absorb the ink but not screw up the signature or whatever, so that it could dry faster. I'm not sure what this is. This is some sort of divider, but I can only get it. This box is hard to get out because it's got, oh, I just dumped them all out. It's supposed to have, the same way this has like a little pull piece of leather to pull it out. It's missing on the others. I should probably replace it. But so you would pull this out, and then you would slide this off, and this is where I keep my pen nibs, extra pen nibs. I'm assuming they would keep pen nibs in there back in the olden days, but it's a nice little box. So that's these are the supplies that I use to ink. Put this back. Very satisfying. I'm not sure how prepared this particular. Why isn't it closing? Oh, you have to press the button to close it. It's kind of nice and tight. So if I were to show you how I would go about inking, first I gotta put my glasses on here just to see. Yeah, I wouldn't even use this one. Well, I guess I could try, because you can see a tiny little bit of light in between the two needle point edges of the end of the nib. And that tells me that it's not gonna flow down the nib as easily as it should. So let's see if that's right. I'll take this, dip it in there, and this is just a scrap drawing that, I guess it's okay. But what I like about these is that you can draw, generally how I do it is I'll draw, I don't have my glasses on right now but I'll draw on pencil, then I'll draw on ink. You kind of fix the pencil as you go along, like fix how you want the lines to be. I'm a little shaky today. And then once that dries, you go and erase the pencil, and then you can go over the ink again and make the ink lines the way you like them.
I generally like to go over my ink lines many times.
So this is a little crazy, but I consider, whoops, I just got ink on the table there. You know what you get that out with? This is going to be easy to get out of the table. Windex. I guess the ammonia in the Windex can even get dried ink out. So I can just do that later. But so every line, in my opinion, has two sides to it. This side and this side. This side, if you're going to draw it like this, the tip of the pen will generally make this side smooth, and that's how I like it. This side is going to be more ragged, and I don't like that. So generally, each of my lines, I almost always go over a minimum of 3 times. The first one are these initial lines that I can erase the pencil and the lines remain. I'm not going to do it now because I see it's still wet. You got to wait till it dries. But then the second time I go over it, I'll go a little darker and a little harder, right? In order to get the line thick where I want it, and I'll keep it thin where I want it. You know, you keep it thick where you want to show weight, and you keep it thin where you want to not show weight. And then I'll turn it over, and then I'll go over the other side of the line so that, again, this is my smooth edge. This is my rough edge. And so I'll put my smooth edge on the other side of the line so that I don't get it. So it's nice and smooth. And it's annoying because I'm probably the only person on earth who ever can see or realize that. But it's still important to me. So it takes longer, but you know what else it does? It adds warmth to the line. It adds like a human hand to it. That there's imperfections everywhere throughout this line. It's not done in vectors. It's not a computer line. It's not perfect. It just adds to the slight imperfections that even if you don't see it as a viewer, you can feel it. And it's just not perfect. And but it's not perfect, but you can see it's exactly where it's intended to be. So that's not something it's easily duplicated via computer lines. One advantage you have over going with pen and ink. This ink also dries completely waterproof, so there's no problem ever in watercoloring over these lines once it's done. And so that's my ink. Yeah. So when obviously it's not just a matter of what you use to make your marks with, you have to figure out what you're gonna make your marks on. And I'm a kind of a sketchbook crazed maniac when it comes to what I make stuff on. I'm sure some of you have seen my videos in the past, but I make my own sketchbook. So obviously I have my own, this is, you can see how far I am on this book because you can see how dirty the pages are. These pages are not drawn in, these have been drawn in, and that's taken me maybe, I guess, well, you can see, since September 1st, 2018. So it's coming up on 2 years it's taken me to make this much stuff. I bind them myself because I have very strict specifications of what I like to work on. Generally, this is Fabriano Artistico 90-pound hot press watercolor paper. It's not too thick that it will turn easily and you can put 2 signatures together in order to sew it together. And it's not too thin that you can work on both sides, both watercolor and pen and ink and anything else. I get real paranoid about ever not having a sketchbook. So while I'm actually working on a new one now, I have another new one that I haven't even started yet. This is the same goat skin of literally the skin of the last sketchbook that I made, but this one's totally blank and I haven't even started it yet. Even so, I'm so apparent, oh, you can see the watermark, Fabriano coming through of that page. Even so, I'm making another sketchbook because I don't ever not want to have one. This is just another drawing that I'm working on now that I have some loose paper at home. This is a thinner piece. This is a 90-pound piece or 200 gram, and this is a 140-pound piece, 300 gram, I think. And I also had some of this stuff at home, so I did a couple of drawings for my sketchbooks. This is a very, very thin, God, I can't remember what this is now. I've just had this for so long. But these are two little drawings that I did that are actually from, I think I've been working with these, oh shoot. So these are the color guys that I did in my sketchbooks that ended up just being these little black and white studies here that I ended up putting on a larger drawing later. So I just have these studies sitting around. And so this is another option to work on at home if you're gonna do watercolor. These are watercolor blocks. I used this one up, but essentially a block is you know how a pad of paper has sticky stuff on the edge that you can it's held together by like a gummy material on the top, and you pull each piece off individually. Well, watercolor blocks have it on all 4 sides, and it's got a real hard back. And then it has one little area, like right here, where there is none, and you can kind of put a knife under there and then take it off. But the reason it's gummed on all 4 sides and sort of glued is so that when you put water on the paper, it expands in between the fibers of the paper and the paper gets real wrinkly. And when it dries, if it's anchored on all 4 sides, it will dry completely flat. And that's generally more desirable. It's easier to frame stuff. And it just it doesn't get as wrinkly. I don't care that much generally, because these things are really expensive. It's much cheaper to buy the 22 by 30 inch generally size sheets and cut it down yourself, which is how I make my books. But this is nice to travel with if you don't want a sketchbook because you want to like maybe frame some of the stuff that you're doing while you're traveling. Arches is pretty good. It's French, but it stinks when it gets wet and it kind of drives me nuts. I think there's the difference between watercolor paper and regular paper and say even toilet paper is the sizing. It's like kind of a glue. Regular paper has sizing internal. As the paper is made, the sizing prevents it from falling apart. Toilet paper has no sizing, and that's why you want it to fall apart in water. And watercolor paper has sizing inside and on the surface, so that when you put water on the surface of the paper, which I'll show you in a minute, it doesn't bleed into the paper. It stays just where you put it on top. So to the color part of all this, I generally use, well, especially at home, because I don't have access to all my studio stuff. This is the stuff that I have at home. I use usually dry pigments. This is just a tiny little box of, it's like a Winsor Newton. Actually, it's funny, it says Winsor Newton on it, but many companies buy these boxes, exact same boxes, and just put their name on it. Kremer is a local New York place. They make some watercolors, mostly oil paints, but they make pigments, and they put them in some watercolors. But you can take, it's kind of crusted over, but you can clean it out, pull these out, and these are called half pans. Put half pans into your box, depending on the colors you want. I don't remember the names of all the colors. I think it's genuine rose, alizarin crimson, deep cadmium red, Prussian blue, weird cadmium yellows, different deepnesses. I forget what green that is, but it's kind of intense. Viridian green blue. There's a yellow viridian green and a blue viridian green. I think this is the blue. Dioxidin purple. I think this is an ultramarine and some sort of cerulean. So the reason I put these weird little Sugru is like a moldable plastic. I put these permanent Sugru things on because it used to, so this used to have like, it broke, but it used to have, you could put water in here and it had a little screw top and then it had a little cap that you would open it up, unscrew it, pour water into the little cap and then hook the cap on the edge. And then you could like be in the field and paint, but I generally don't paint in the field. The reason I put these on is because it will make it lie flat instead of down on the edge, because if you don't have these on here, all the water pools over to one side and it's kind of a pain. I generally just use this on a table. So while it's not as, it looks really stupid, it makes it a little bit more functional. This was one of my earliest ones that I got in England. I got this in London when I graduated from college in 1995, and it's obviously seen better days. This is a water reservoir kind of tank that I don't generally use, but it's just kind of a little surface thing, a palette to mix your colors. I take these in and out and mix colors around. There's a little sponge here to absorb the color, and this is a wadded out paper towel. Some of similar colors, some slightly different from my other set, but I use these together when I watercolor at home because for different reasons, for different colors and mixing different palettes. It's nice not to have a ton of stuff around it. Like I'll sit in a rocking chair and I'll watercolor and all I need are these little things. When I'm feeling a little bit more ambitious, like I just recently did I just drew like 50 drawings for people and watercolored them. I need to spread out a little bit more. And so I'll use these. I get these, so in New York, there's a ton of restaurant supply stores. And so I think these are for soy sauce or something. Some are porcelain, some are plastic, but these are amazingly great and they're cheap, and I don't care if they break. I think this was $3.95 for this nice big one. I put some of that moldable plastic on here so that it's, I think, you know, one reason you get a certain amount in a package and you have to use it. So I thought, just use it on this and make this a real nice, stable. And also when I'm on my slanted desk, it won't slide down as easily because porcelain on Formica or whatever the heck my drafting desk is, it slides, but this keeps it steady. And these are great too. These are just super cheap, like less than $1. But it's really useful to mix one, you know, if I'm doing my donuts and I need this pink color, I'll just, you know, do put a whole bunch of water in here and mix it up. And then I don't have to keep mixing the same color over and over and over again. I have enough of it. So that's one thing that I use, but if I generally keep this in my studio, but these are full pans. So if these are half pans, these are full pans, and this must have broken. I don't know where this blue came from, but yeah, so you can just re-wet these. It's generally not as good as if you were to use them straight out of a tube, which I also do sometimes. I will sometimes take the tube, like if I'm working in my studio and I'm working huge, I'll take some out of the tube and I'll just smear it on the edge of this and then pour, say, water, that much water under it, and then just mix that in, and then it mixes really easily. If it's still sort of pasty and it's not dry, it mixes really easily and really evenly. You can still kind of do that with the dry pigment, but it takes longer and it's not as easy to do. So I do that sometimes. I also have these just cheap palettes that I really like when I'm sitting on the couch and I can just set it on the couch and I have all these, I don't clean them usually because it's hard to make these colors. Like these colors can be perfect for what you want it for, but it's hard to get it that way when you need it. So that if you have these dirty palettes, you just re-wet it a little bit and you're golden. You don't have to worry about it. As far as brushes go, so I used to just use travel brushes at home. This is like a fancier Windsor Terrace, that's where I live, Windsor Newton brush that you pull the top off. So it's travel because it's compact and it won't ruin the bristles in your travel satchel, if that's what you use. But these are Retractable Sable. I don't know if this is red Kolinsky Sable because it's not as good as some of their other brushes, but generally I find Windsor Newton brushes, Kolinsky Sable, are the best that for the way I use it. So you take the back off and then you push it in and it pushes this little button in and the brush comes out. It's kind of nice and small, and this is kind of a big brush for this little handle. And generally what you want it to be, the way I use water brushes, you want it to be a point because it's real versatile that way. Then you can paint real tiny things. Let's see, I can play around with this. So you can paint tiny with the tip, and then you can also get real broad. So 5 is probably the biggest that I would use. I generally use a 5 or a 4. And I guess this is in pretty good shape. I've had this brush for 20 years, but I don't use it very often. And when you take it out, it protects the bristles, and then it's a nice compact brush again. These were Da Vinci's. I have had it for so long that it's worn off. So you can notice there's a little, can you see that hole through the middle? That hole is so that when you screw it back in, it will dry and it won't get moldy or whatever. You can see how this brush is kind of blown out. You can kind of reshape it once it's wet, but it doesn't quite hold the tip anymore. One of the reasons you use Kolinsky Sable, and it's the best of any of the bristles for what I like it for, is that it's got a snap. It snaps back, so when you're brushing, it doesn't stay in the position. It'll snap back to be straight again, and that's helpful when you're watercoloring. Also, it'll hold the tip. It'll hold the point better. This particular hair, and it also retains water better. Like you can have more water on it. And one of the tricks you learn when you're watercoloring is always know how much water is on your brush at one time. If you're trying to make a wash and if there's too much water on it, it's going to pool up. And if there's not enough, you're going to stop and there's going to be a line right there. You can never really get rid of it. Once this line is here, it's there. You can never get rid of it, no matter how many layers you put over it. But you know, to be honest, I've gotten a little, I don't know if it's lazy or cheap, but I generally just buy these. These are expensive though. These are like maybe 50 or 60 bucks. For these, which is why I try to take care of them, and I keep the cheap little plastic caps on them. These are Windsor Newton Kolinsky Sables. This is a number 4. This is generally my go-to brush and my go-to size. So like, oh, this is another cool little tool. These little pipettes for, I guess, scientific endeavors. I like to put a little drop and sort of let it start to dissolve a little bit of the paint before I even need it. And that way it doesn't take quite as long to mix the color. So like, I'll just put a little color there and then noodle around. I generally work, this is wet on dry. So wet on dry means you're working with a wet brush on dry paper. Wet on wet is like, you can see how the paper is wet here. Then you can put like a new color in there and it'll do some interesting weird stuff. It'll kind of fade in and stuff like that. That's wet on wet. And I think there's also dry on dry, which I really don't like. It's when you kind of like, your brush is kind of dry, but it's loaded with paint. It's like, whoops, kind of does this. And I don't know, I never learned how to do that, and I don't really like that. I like to go in layers. So I'll like, if I want to make a really bright pink, I'll get like a yellow, or like I'll even mix a ton of yellow if I know I'm going to be doing a pink, and then I'll put some yellow down, let it dry, and then once that's dry, I'll go layer over layer over layer of pinks, and then that yellow behind the pink make it really pop out. Yeah, so that's, I think, all I need to say about watercolor, I think. So if I was to, let's say, watercolor the, this, say, donut in my sketchbook, I generally would go with a base of a not cool, maybe a tiny bit warm yellow, go over the whole thing, because I want to make it pink and brown. So I'll get a camera right in front of my face, so it's hard to get real accurate here. I'm just going to do a real rough one. So the other thing that I like to do when I'm watercoloring is generally go do more than one thing at a time, because once one thing is drying, it's nice to be able to do other stuff at the same time. So I'm just going to do some real loose stuff here, just kind of play. That's the nice thing about the sketchbook, is you can, nothing's well, it's permanent, but it's not, who cares? You just kind of play around like, oh, we put some purples here, maybe go there. Let's put a little bit of, that's a little too intense. Some blues, whoops, some blues up there. And then once this dries, you can kind of do some other stuff with it, right? I guess I do sometimes do wet on wet. Okay, that's still gonna be, it's gonna take a little while to dry. Why don't we go, to dry. Why don't we do this in the meantime, and then maybe play around. Just, who cares? Just do whatever. Maybe add this over here and let it blend together, and add some more yellow in there. Is that dry? Maybe it's dry enough. I'm gonna rush this along. So this is a little too much. Never go full dark color. It's better, see, that's even too intense for me. I generally like to go in layers and let the layers intensify the color, because it's richer that way. You can get it more saturated, and you can get it more even too. You also don't want to let it dry in one spot. If you want it to look smooth, you want it to be real nice and even. So that's where knowing how much water is on your brush. My brush is was about to empty out, so, which was perfect because I was just about done with that particular area. Let's see. Sometimes, like, I treat my sketchbook like composition, like, oh, that's blue over there. Maybe it'd be nice to have a little green over here in the middle. And what I like about going slow is that it's fun to experiment. Like, sometimes you'll get a different color. If you put green down and yellow over the green, that will look vastly different than if you put the same yellow down and go green over that yellow. Did I just say that? Well, whatever it is, whatever the opposite is. And sometimes I just like wanna play with specific colors. So I will just mess around and see what happens. You know, like that's kind of cool the way that happened that way. And when you try to have too much control, like I sometimes have to step back a bit because I feel like I'm getting too controlling, then you kind of, it's nice to just do real loose stuff like this. I'm holding the brush at the end because I want to be loose. I don't want to be super tight and controlled. When I'm doing a tiny little area, you know, you hold it up tight in the front so you can get be super accurate. I don't care about that right now. I'd rather not be super accurate. So I want to go over here and sort of make that look like a donut, like brown donut, but I can see that's still a little bit wet, so I still have to wait a little bit. I'm sort of trying to rush it a little bit here. So here, let's go a little bit of yellow over some parts of the ribbon. And then what if we did I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just playing around. So if I want to make these bright yellow, bright green stems here, I'm going to go yellow here for the base. Generally yellow under red and green is makes it pop out more. Never mess around with yellows behind blues and purples because it will make it look dull and ugly, in my opinion. I almost always, depending on what I want to do with it, keep yellow underneath my reds, pinks, and greens. Sometimes yellow kind of lightens it up a little bit. And then is that sometimes I'll touch my lip to it because it's more sensitive. My lip is more sensitive than my finger, and I'll be able to tell if it's dry or not. I'm not gonna stick my head onto the paper now to try and see if it's dry, but it looks like it might be. I just don't want the pink to bleed in, even though I'm going loose with this right now. And then maybe, since that little donut is a different piece of material, I'll add another color to the same brown ink I was just using, change it up a little bit, maybe warm it up a little bit so that it differentiates itself a bit. So this is just one layer, and then I'll go, once that dries, I'll go layer after layer after layer of color. Now I can go back to this iris. Now that's a little more dry, and go over with some of the purple areas. Start to play with the depth of the flower, since maybe keep the darker colors in the back, or I don't know. Now I can go with the green over here. And then it might be nice to have like, whoops, sorry for all the wiggling. I always have my water. Let's see if this works. My water is on top of a piece of paper towel and it gets soaked, because that's how I know how much water is going to be on my brush, by dipping it in here, adding some color to it. Oh, that's way too much, and I'll dab it there just so that I know I have just the right amount, so that when I add it to the page, it doesn't soak everything and run everywhere. I have just the right amount, and that just comes with experience, knowing your paper, knowing your the watercolor that you use, and knowing your brush. It just takes a little while to learn that. So yeah. So I could just go over this, like as it dries, you just keep going over it again and again, add layer after layer after layer, and it becomes rich and full of depth, and yeah.